Usually the way this would be explained to you is this. If you drink, smoke, chew, or go with girls who do, then you are separate from our group, you see. We do the ethical thing here, according to us, and you do not. And so there is a division there, all right, but the division there is based on righteousness according to the law of a particular subculture. We'll just say it like that. And sometimes that happens a lot. It happens a lot. But this is not what Jesus is talking about at all. Jesus is talking about the division that comes from the true judgment that God must judge sin, and also the incredible gift of mercy that He gives in His Son. And both of these things are scandalous. And both of these things, they are divisive. And let me put it to you this way. My wife went out on a long overdue girls' night out. And I don't know what they did. She didn't tell me. I didn't ask. But I was left there alone with the boys, and they were asleep, and I had a choice. Shall I read a bettering book, as Stephen Fry and Jeeves and Worcester? Should I read a book that's bettering, or shall I watch television? Now, I did what any intelligent, educated, and well-read young person would do, and I watched Attack of the Crab Monsters from 1957. And it is a gloriously bad movie. It really is. And the star is the professor from Gilligan's Island, if you want to know. You probably don't. But the beginning of Attack of the Crab Monsters from 1957, the very beginning, before anything ever happens, the camera is sort of hovering above the ocean, and the narrator's voice comes in, and it says this. It quotes Genesis 6, right before the flood story. It says this, and God saw the wickedness of man, and He purposed to wipe them from the face of the earth. That's what it said. An Attack of the Crab Monsters of all movies. But think about that for a second. Think about that text of judgment, and it sort of rocks you back on your heels, because it's an offensive thing to say something like that. I heard it, and immediately my blood pressure starts going up, and I thought, oh, I'm in church again. I thought I was taking a vacation. And but you go on through the movie, and there's a bunch of people, a bunch of survivors on this island, and the island is supposed to represent the whole world. And what happens is crab monsters, giant crab monsters, as big as that back there in the Narthex, come, and they eat people. They'll eat them, and they're going ah, and they're eating them, and when they eat the people, what they do is they take on the person's intelligence, or rather they take on what Freud would call the id of the person, the dark intelligence of the person, and they go around talking, and they'll call to people. The giant crab monsters will be calling in sort of Vincent Price-like voice. And are you interested yet? And it all sort of comes about, and there's this really dire situation. And this is really the context of judgment that we see in Luke 12. Because as Jesus set His face towards Jerusalem like flint, something switched. And He goes on to, and He starts telling us parables of grace. But the question is, grace from what? And Luke 12 is very clear. Deliverance from judgment. Judgment, very palpable and powerful and hot judgment that we see in Luke 12. And that is a divisive word that comes to us from Scripture. The word of judgment. Judgment on me? Don't judge me. I mean, we all watch Real Housewives, right? We watch Real Housewives of Orange County. We watch Real Housewives of Atlanta. We watch Real Housewives of New York and New Jersey. And there's another one that doesn't matter. We all watch those. And what's the entire premise behind Real Housewives? Don't judge me. You see, I speak the truth because I can obviously objectively interpret the truth. 2, don't judge me. And you don't even have to watch it anymore because I've told you what it's about. But don't judge. You see, judgment puts people back on their heels. And it makes people very, very uncomfortable. And this alone, when somebody comes into a family talking about judgment where they previously hadn't, the family will start to, well, should we send them to see somebody? You know, something like that. Well, but it's not just judgment that is scandalous. Something even more scandalous in this portion of Luke. And for this, I must go back to the movie, The Attack of the Crab Monsters. Now, if you watch the movie, you will see that, and this happens in all 1950s B movies, they all have an unlimited supply of ammunition, and with 38s, revolvers. And what they're doing is they're shooting. They must have shot 10,000 rounds at these giant crab monsters. Why? I don't know. It had no effect. But they found out that the one thing that could kill the crab monsters was electricity. And for some reason, they had a big electrical plant there on this deserted island. And so the professor from Gilligan's Island, he saws the tower, and he gets on top of the tower, and he pushes the tower over on top of the crab monster, and it kills the crab monster, and it kills him too. Now I'm going somewhere. This isn't just me talking. The surviving woman and the surviving man look at each other, and the woman looks at the man, and she says this: "He died to save us." And those are the last words of the movie, and the movie credits go off. But think about this. The first words of the movie were, "And God saw the wickedness of man and purposed to wipe them from the face of the earth." The last words of the movie, "He died to save us." Now, do you think Roger Corman, who was the director of the movie, had something to say? Sounds like he had something to say. Now, the scandalous part of this is he died to save us. In other words, I had nothing of my own that I could use to move myself from the situation I was in. Nothing I had. I had no leverage. "Nothing in my hand I bring," said Top Lady. And that is another scandal. Because have you ever met somebody who cannot take a gift? You know, you give them a gift, and what's the first thing they do? They go to Target to buy a gift from the person who gave them a gift because, you know, they need to even out the equation. There needs to be some justice. You know, those people who can. What about if you're a husband and you're not very handy around the house and something happens to your fence and your neighbor fixes it for you? You're grateful, but you're a little bit embarrassed because your wife was watching, and you should be handy enough to fix the fence, right? Am I just talking to myself here? Well, that is what is so scandalous about this. Something I didn't and couldn't earn is given. The human condition cannot countenance judgment, and it cannot countenance a free gift. That's just not within us. But for those who believe, for those whose hearts have been pricked by the gospel message of Christ dying for sinners, it is life itself. It turns everything around. And you know what it does? it makes you into an incredibly humble and incredibly loving person. When this grace message gets a hold of you, you know, you have the righteous message. Don't drink, smoke, or chew, or go with girls who do. You remember that? You see, that creates division. But the people who are actually sort of pulling that off are insufferable. You don't want to hang around with those people because they're incredibly arrogant. But if you are a sinner saved by grace, if you have nothing in your hand and something immeasurably eternal has been placed in your hand, you become a very humble and loving person. Peace. When the Bible talks about peace, it is talking about peace with God. It is not talking about some sort of feeling of contentment. That's not what it's talking about. It's talking about, now it may come down the line, but peace with God is what the Bible is talking about. And when you have peace with God, you begin to have peace with your neighbor, because you're no longer having to crawl all over them to reach the top. You know, to identify, to create your own identity. You're not crawling over people to do this. Now, this creates change, and this creates division, because if your heart is changed, and you feel like, and you're in a family business like I was, and you feel forced to be in the family business, and you've been gripped by this message, and you want to go into the ministry, or you want to go do something, or you want to start your own business, whatever it is. But you're breaking the shackles of the things that you thought you had to do in order to create yourself, and you're moving into a direction of love and working in a direction of love. That is going to create division. Your dad's not going to like it when you leave the family business. Now, when I noticed that teenage girls begin to get this message when they start putting on a couple of pounds. And they don't feel like they have to be in this beauty rat race that they see on the internet, and they see on Pretty Little Liars, and they see on the billboards and in the magazines, because they can sort of relax and be themselves, because they are recipients of grace and they have peace with God. And what this does is it moves you to a place where hope is outside of your ability to conjure. Hope is fixed eternally, and that's peace. And it's divisive because people won't understand. People will not understand. So it's divisive. But you've begun to live at that point when you have been addressed in this manner. And you have begun to live life abundantly. Life with peace with God. Life with peace with your neighbor. And that is a new creation. Amen.